So I just came across a really interesting article by the Associated Press concerning Father Rupnik, the very controversial priest who has been accused of abusing quite a few women over the course of multiple decades. The Vatican has been looking through his case, and it's also been very controversial in the way that the Vatican has handled it for quite a number of reasons. We actually covered an update to the situation with Rupnik's trial not long ago. It was, in fact, last week. And the Vatican is saying they're getting ready to appoint judges for his case. And they have been dragging their feet. So we've been asking questions like, why is it taking so long? Why are they just now appointing judges? But at least, we're finally at that stage, and maybe we will see a trial soon. At the same time, while that news has just been released, the Jesuit order has made an interesting overture to the alleged victims of Rupnik. The reason why they have done this is because Rupnik is part of the Jesuit order. So let me share my screen and show you what exactly is going on. Jesuits make a broad offer of reparations to women who say that they were abused by ex-Jesuit artists. Now, think about that for a second before we dive into the article. Right after we're told that the Vatican has already gone through the investigation stage, and now they're appointing judges. Right after that, we're being told by the Jesuits that they're reaching out to the alleged victims and offering reparations to these women. Now, I don't know if it's common for Jesuits to offer reparations for, alleged victims if the accused is innocent. It almost sounds like the Jesuits basically know that he's guilty, and they're just going ahead and offering reparations because they seem to know what is coming down the pike. Could it be that since the investigation portion of this situation with Rupnik at the Vatican is already over, they're appointed judges, so investigation is over, could it be that they found out, that they caught wind that, yeah, the evidence looks really bad and there's likely going to be a conviction here, and he seems to be guilty. And so to get ahead of things before that issue, explodes even more in the media, they go ahead and offer reparations to the alleged victims. It really comes across that way. It's like, do y'all know something? I think we all know what the case is here, right? I think we all know whether he's innocent or guilty. But do the Jesuits know as well? Seems like they know something. Seems like they're anticipating something. Let's take a look at what's going on. Pope Francis's Jesuit religious order is making a broad gesture of reparations to some 20 women who say that they were sexually, psychologically, and spiritually abused by a famous ex-Jesuit artist and have been awaiting for justice for years from the Vatican. A top Jesuit official in Rome, the Reverend Johann Versuchen, said Wednesday that he had sent a letter outlining the offer to 20 people who say they were abused by the Reverend Marco Rupnik. So they reached out to about 20 of the alleged victims, and there are more than 20. The Slovenian artist is one of the most celebrated religious artists in the Catholic Church, and his mosaics decorate churches and basilicas around the world, including at the Vatican. Not to mention, he is still an active priest. The Jesuits expelled Rupnik from their order in 2023 after more than 24 women came forward to say that he had sexually, spiritually, and psychologically abused them over 30 years. Some while they were collaborating with him on artworks, which is why some have called to remove those mosaics, not just because they're ugly, but also because they may have been involved in this kind of behavior in their production, and it sends the wrong message to abuse victims in the world to keep that garbage up. He remains a priest, and his supporters have denied he did anything wrong. The women had made the claims against him years ago, but Rupnik long escaped punishment, both because the women were not minors at the time of the alleged abuse and because of his exalted status in the Church of the Vatican, where even Pope Francis's role in the case came into question. With the case languishing at the Vatican, Versuchen wrote to the 20 alleged victims on Tuesday, lamenting that Rupnik had refused to engage in a path of truth and reparation, and that the institutional church for years had refused to hear their claims or provide justice. He said now the Jesuit order had confidence that a process of healing and inner reconciliation is possible, provided there is also a path of truth and recognition on our part. According to the excerpts of the letter cited by a lawyer for some of the women, Laura Scaro, I guess is how you would pronounce it, two consonants there in a row. In an email to the Associated Press, Versuchen confirmed that the letters invited victims to know what they would need to know now and how we can meet that need, he said. He described the gesture as an extended hand offered on an individual and anonymous and case-by-case basis. But is this something that you do if there's still doubt that a person is innocent or guilty? Seems like they know something, right? Any path to reparation will totally depend on the person invited. The concreteness of that will follow later, he said, adding that the Jesuits, too, need to learn from the victims so that such abuse is not repeated. I mean, so they are very confident that these are victims of abuse. And by the way, I'm not saying they're not. But what I'm saying is the Jesuits are very confident that this happened. These are victims, that Rupnik is guilty. And he hasn't seen his trial yet. So did they maybe catch wind of how the investigation process that has already been concluded at the Vatican, how that process went, and what that evidence will eventually yield in a canonical court? Often such gestures from the church involve economic assistance in the forms of spiritual or psychological help, as well as financial compensation or even help finding work. Scaro thanked Versuchen and the Jesuits for what she called a clear and strong, concrete gesture of reparation. She called for the Vatican's dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, which is handling the Rupnik case, to finally prosecute him and restore dignity to the victims. There really could be no more delay now. Justice has to be done, she said. I mean, it's long overdue, right? Whatever decision they're going to come to, this is long overdue, and it's absolutely shameful it's taken this long. And really, I don't see any kind of legitimate excuse for the delay. The Rupnik scandal first exploded publicly in late 2022 when the Jesuit order admitted that he had been excommunicated briefly in 2020 for having committed one of the Catholic Church's most serious crimes, using the confessional to absolve a woman with whom he had engaged in sexual activity. I mean, that's wow. So what that means is he engaged in sexual activity with a woman, and then to get right with God, for the woman to be reconciled to God after that sin, she goes to him for confession and he gives her absolution. So the man you engaged in the sin with is then offering you absolution. Well, obviously the church is going to say, no, that can never be done. And when a person does that, when a priest does that, absolves a person for some kind of sexual sin that they were engaged in with the penitent, there is usually an excommunication, and it can only be lifted by the Pope. So you can see where this is going. If he had been briefly excommunicated, and it can only be lifted by the Pope. The case continued to create problems for the Jesuits and Francis, since the Vatican initially refused to prosecute other allegations of abuse, arguing the claims were too old. Under pressure because of suspicions that he had protected his fellow Jesuit. Francis ultimately waived the statute of limitations so that the Vatican could open a proper canonical trial. So basically what happened was people felt like, okay, Pope Francis isn't going to prosecute him because they're friends. The claim was, well, we didn't prosecute because it was past the statute of limitations, if you will. But because Pope Francis got so much criticism and there was so much suspicion at that point that he was maybe covering for his friend, Pope Francis went ahead and waived the statute of limitations so that the Vatican could now proceed with a canonical trial. And that's been a couple years ago. And so they've been doing the investigation process for several years now. And again, received a lot of criticism for kind of dragging their feet on the matter, it would seem. Francis, in a 2023 interview with the Associated Press, denied that he had intervened in the case other than procedurally. While the investigation had been completed, no tribunal has yet been convened to hear the case. So they're starting to talk to judges, putting their feelers out, asking, hey, would you be a judge? The head of the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, Fernandez, told reporters last week he was having a hard time confirming external judges to hear the case. The case is highly sensitive, giving suggestions of favoritism for the Pope's friend, and has raised questions about what to do with the dozens of basilicas around the world that feature the artist's distinctive mosaics. So you can see why, some of the judges don't want to touch this with the 10-foot pole, especially the media nature behind the trial. We've made a list of possible judges, and we've started talking to them because you have to find judges who have certain characteristics for such a mediatic thing. To date, Rupnik hasn't responded publicly to the allegations and refused to respond to his Jesuit superiors during the investigation. I'll add to that, he also refused to answer any questions to a reporter in a video that I showed just a few weeks ago, where a reporter in Rome tried to ask him questions at an airport. The whole time he dodged her, wouldn't answer her, and goes and rushes away into his vehicle and drives away. That doesn't exactly scream out, I'm innocent. His supporters at his Centro Aletti art studio have denounced what they called a media lynching, of course. So, suppose we'll find out the truth soon. But I did think it was really interesting that the Jesuits are going ahead before any kind of decision to a Vatican trial that hasn't even started. Before that even happens, they're already reaching out, offering reparations to the alleged victims. That tells you something. That tells you a lot. I'll let you know how this continues to unfold if there are any updates to it and the Rupnik situation, so stay tuned. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell for notifications so you know when I go live. By the way, today at 4 p.m. Central, so in 4 hours, 3 hours, 45 minutes, I am going to show the interview that I had with Dr. Bart Ehrman on the question of the disciples and their belief, or as he proposes, lack of belief in the resurrection. And we discussed the matter, and I think you'll find the potential solution to the criticisms that he's leveling and to his theory that some of the apostles may not have believed the resurrection. I think you'll find the solution at the end of the video very, very interesting because it's a solution that Catholics and Eastern Orthodox could accept, but it's not one that Protestants could accept. So this will put Protestants in more of a difficult situation, I would think. Be that as it may, I look forward to hearing y'all's thoughts. Check it out today, 3 hours, 45 minutes from now, 4 p.m. Central, my interview with Dr. Bart Ehrman. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe button. Check me out at patreon.com/Reason and Theology if you want to support the channel. See you soon. Hey, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, the like button, and if you want to support the channel, visit patreon.com/Reason and Theology.